This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ragged Dick, or Street Life in New York with the Bootblacks, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 19. Fosdick Changes His Business. Fosdick did not venture to wear his new clothes while engaged in his business. This he felt would have been wasteful extravagance. About 10 o'clock in the morning, when business slackened, he went home, and dressing himself went to a hotel where he could see copies of the Morning Herald and Sun, and noting down the places where a boy was wanted, went on a round of applications. But he found it no easy thing to obtain a place. Swarms of boys seemed to be out of employment, and it was not unusual to find from 50 to 100 applicants for a single place. There was another difficulty. It was generally desired that the boy wanted should reside with his parents. When Fosdick, on being questioned, revealed the fact of his having no parents and being a boy of the street, this was generally sufficient of itself to ensure a refusal. Merchants were afraid to trust one who had led such a vagabond life. Dick, who was always ready for an emergency, suggested borrowing a white wig and passing himself off for Fosdick's father or grandfather. But Henry thought this might be rather a difficult character for our hero to sustain. After 50 applications, and as many failures, Fosdick began to get discouraged. There seemed to be no way out of his present business, for which he felt unfitted. "I don't know but I shall have to black boots all my life," he said one day, despondently, to Dick. "Keep a stiff upper lip," said Dick. "By the time you get to be a gray-haired veteran, you may get a chance to run errands for some big firm on the Bowery, which is a very cheerin' reflection." So Dick, by his drollery and perpetual good spirits, kept up Fosdick's courage. "As for me," said Dick, "I expect by that time to lay up a colossal fortune out of shines, and live in princely style on the Avenue." But one morning Fosdick, straying into French's hotel, discovered the following advertisement in the columns of the Herald: "Wanted, a smart, capable boy to run errands and make himself generally useful in the hat and cape store. Salary $3 a week at first. Inquire at No. Broadway after 10 o'clock a.m." He determined to make application, and as the City Hall clock just then struck the hour indicated, lost no time in proceeding to the store, which was only a few blocks distant from the Astor House. It was easy to find the store, as from a dozen to 20 boys were already assembled in front of it. They surveyed each other askance, feeling that they were rivals, and mentally calculating each other's chances. "There isn't much chance for me," said Fosdick to Dick, who had accompanied him. "Look at all these boys. Most of them have good homes, I suppose, and good recommendations, while I have nobody to refer to." "Go ahead," said Dick. "Your chance is as good as anybody's." While this was passing between Dick and his companion, one of the boys, a rather supercilious-looking young gentleman, genteelly dressed, and evidently having a very high opinion of his dress and himself, turned suddenly to Dick and remarked, "I've seen you before." "Oh, have you?" said Dick, whirling round. "Then p'r'aps you'd like to see me behind." At this unexpected answer all the boys burst into a laugh, with the exception of the questioner, who, evidently, considered that Dick had been disrespectful. "I've seen you somewhere," he said in a surly tone, correcting himself. "Most likely you have," said Dick. "That's where I generally keep myself." There was another laugh at the expense of Roswell Crawford, for that was the name of the young aristocrat. But he had his revenge ready. No boy relishes being an object of ridicule, and it was with a feeling of satisfaction that he retorted, "I know you, for all your impudence. You're nothing but a bootblack." This information took the boys who were standing around by surprise, for Dick was well dressed, and had none of the implements of his profession with him. "Suppose I be," said Dick. "Have you got any objection?" "Not at all," said Roswell, curling his lip. "Only you'd better stick to blacking boots, and try not to get into a store." "Thank you for your kind advice," said Dick. "Is it gratuitous, or do you expect to be paid for it?" "You're an impudent fellow." "That's a very cheerin' reflection," said Dick, good-naturedly. "Do you expect to get this place when there's gentlemen's sons applying for it? A bootblack in a store!
That would be a good joke."
Boys as well as men are selfish, and looking upon Dick as a possible rival, the boys who listened seemed disposed to take the same view of the situation. "That's what I say," said one of them, taking sides with Roswell. "Don't trouble yourselves," said Dick. "I ain't a-goin' to cut you out. I can't afford to give up an independent and lucrative profession for a salary of $3 a week."
"Hear him talk," said Roswell Crawford, with an unpleasant sneer. "If you're not trying to get the place, what are you here for?"
"I came with a friend of mine," said Dick, indicating Fosdick, "who's going in for the situation."
"Is he a bootblack too?"
demanded Roswell, superciliously. "Ha!" retorted Dick, loftily. "Didn't you know his father was a member of Congress, and intimately acquainted with all the biggest men in the state?" The boys surveyed Fosdick as if they did not quite know whether to credit this statement, which, for the credit of Dick's veracity, it will be observed he did not assert, but only propounded in the form of a question. There was no time for comment, however, as just then the proprietor of the store came to the door, and casting his eyes over the waiting group, singled out Roswell Crawford and asked him to enter.
"Well, my lad, how old are you?" 14 years old, said Roswell, consequentially. "Are your parents living?" "Only my mother. My father is dead. He was a gentleman," he added complacently. "Oh, was he?" said the shopkeeper. "Do you live in the city?" "Yes, sir, in Clinton Place." "Have you ever been in a situation before?" Yes, sir," said Roswell, a little reluctantly. "Where was it?" "In an office on Day Street." "How long were you there?" "A week." "It seems to me that was a short time. Why did you not stay longer?" "Because," said Roswell, loftily, "the man wanted me to get to the office at 8 o'clock and make the fire. I'm a gentleman's son, and not used to such dirty work." "Indeed," said the shopkeeper. "Well, young gentleman, you may step aside a few minutes. I will speak with some of the other boys before making my selection."
Several other boys were called in and questioned. Roswell stood by and listened with an air of complacency. He could not help thinking his chances the best. "The man can see I'm a gentleman, and will do credit to his store," he thought. At length it came to Fosdick's turn. He entered with no very sanguine anticipations of success. Unlike Roswell, he set a very low estimate upon his qualifications when compared with those of other applicants. But his modest bearing and quiet, gentlemanly manner, entirely free from pretension, prepossessed the shopkeeper, who was a sensible man, in his favor. "Do you reside in the city?" he asked. "Yes, sir," said Henry. "What is your age?" 12. "Have you ever been in any situation?" "No, sir." "I should like to see a specimen of your handwriting. Here, take the pen and write your name." Henry Fosdick had a very handsome handwriting for a boy of his age, while Roswell, who had submitted to the same test, could do little more than scrawl. "Do you live with your parents?" "No, sir. They are dead." "Where do you live, then?" "In Mott Street." Roswell curled his lip when the name was pronounced, for Mott Street, as my New York readers know, is in the immediate neighborhood of the 5 Points, and very far from a fashionable locality. "Have you any testimonials to present?" asked Mr. Henderson, for that was his name. Fosdick hesitated. This was the question which he had foreseen would give him trouble. But at this moment it happened most opportunely that Mr. Grayson entered the shop with the intention of buying a hat. "Yes," said Fosdick, promptly. "I will refer to this gentleman." "How do you do, Fosdick?" asked Mr. Grayson, noticing him for the first time. "How do you happen to be here?" "I am applying for a place, sir," said Fosdick. "May I refer the gentleman to you?" "Certainly. I shall be glad to speak a good word of you. Mr. Henderson, this is a member of my Sunday school class, of whose good qualities and good abilities I can speak confidently." "That will be sufficient," said the shopkeeper, who knew Mr. Grayson's high character and position. "He could have no better recommendation. You may come to the store tomorrow morning at 7:30 o'clock. The pay will be $3 a week for the first 6 months. If I am satisfied with you, I shall then raise it to $5. The other boys looked disappointed, but none more so than Roswell Crawford. He would have cared less if any one else had obtained the situation, but for a boy who lived in Mott Street to be preferred to him, a gentleman's son, he considered indeed humiliating. In a spirit of petty spite he was tempted to say, "He's a bootblack. Ask him if he isn't."
"He's an honest and intelligent lad," said Mr. Grayson. "As for you, young man, I only hope you have one half his good qualities."
Roswell Crawford left the store in disgust, and the other unsuccessful applicants with him. "What luck, Fosdick?" asked Dick eagerly, as his friend came out of the store. "I've got the place," said Fosdick, in accents of satisfaction. "But it was only because Mr. Grayson spoke up for me." "He's a trump," said Dick enthusiastically. The gentleman so denominated came out before the boys went away, and spoke with them kindly. Both Dick and Henry were highly pleased at the success of the application. The pay would indeed be small, but, expended economically, Fosdick thought he could get along on it, receiving his room rent, as before, in return for his services as Dick's private tutor. Dick determined, as soon as his education would permit, to follow his companion's example. "I don't know as you'll be willing to room with a bootblack," he said to Henry, "now you're going into business." "I couldn't room with a better friend, Dick," said Fosdick affectionately, throwing his arm around our hero. "When we part, it'll be because you wish it." So Fosdick entered upon a new career. End of chapter 19. Chapter 20. 9 months later. The next morning Fosdick rose early, put on his new suit, and after getting breakfast, set out for the Broadway store in which he had obtained a position. He left his little blacking box in the room. "It'll do to brush my own shoes," he said. "Who knows but I may have to come back to it again?" "No danger," said Dick. "I'll take care of the feet, and you'll have to look after the heads, now you're in a hat store." "I wish you had a place, too," said Fosdick. "I don't know enough yet," said Dick. "Wait till I've graduated." "And can put A.B. after your name." "What's that?" "It stands for Bachelor of Arts. It's a degree that students get when they graduate from college." "Oh," said Dick. "I didn't know but it meant a bootblack. I can put that after my name now. Wouldn't Dick Hunter, A.B., sound tip-top?" "I must be going," said Fosdick. "It won't do for me to be late the very first morning." "That's the difference between you and me," said Dick. "I'm my own boss, and there ain't no one to find fault with me if I'm late. But I might as well be going, too. There's a gent as come down to his store pretty early that generally wants a shine." The two boys parted at the park. Fosdick crossed it and proceeded to the hat store, while Dick, hitching up his pants, began to look about him for a customer. It was seldom that Dick had to wait long. He was always on the alert, and if there was any business to do he was always sure to get his share of it. He had now a stronger inducement than ever to attend strictly to business, his little stock of money in the savings bank having been nearly exhausted by his liberality to his roommate. He was determined to be as economical as possible, and moreover to study as hard as he could, that he might be able to follow Fosdick's example, and obtain a place in a store or counting room. As there were no striking incidents occurring in our hero's history within the next 9 months, I propose to pass over that period and recount the progress he made in that time. Fosdick was still at the hat store, having succeeded in giving perfect satisfaction to Mr. Henderson. His wages had just been raised to $5 a week. He and Dick still kept house together at Mrs. Mooney's lodging house, and lived very frugally, so that both were able to save up money. Dick had been unusually successful in business. He had several regular patrons who had been drawn to him by his ready wit and quick humor, and from 2 of them he had received presents of clothing, which had saved him any expense on that score. His income had averaged quite $7 a week in addition to this. Of this amount he was now obliged to pay $1 weekly for the room which he and Fosdick occupied, but he was still able to save 1/2 the remainder. At the end of 9 months, therefore, or 39 weeks, it will be seen that he had accumulated no less a sum than $117. Dick may be excused for feeling like a capitalist when he looked at the long row of deposits in his little bank book. There were other boys in the same business who had earned as much money, but they had had little care for the future, and spent as they went along, so that few could boast a bank account, however small. "You'll be a rich man sometime, Dick," said Henry Fosdick one evening. "And live on Fifth Avenue," said Dick. "Perhaps so. Stranger things have happened." "Well," said Dick, "if such a misfortune should come upon me, I should bear it like a man. When you see a Fifth Avenue mansion for sale for $117, just let me know, and I'll buy it as an investment." 250 years ago you might have bought one for that price, probably. Real estate wasn't very high among the Indians. "Just my luck," said Dick. "I was born too late. I'd orter have been an Indian and lived in splendor on my present capital." "I'm afraid you'd have found your present business rather unprofitable at that time." But Dick had gained something more valuable than money. He had studied regularly every evening, and his improvement had been marvelous. He could now read well, write a fair hand, and had studied arithmetic as far as interest. Besides this, he had obtained some knowledge of grammar and geography. If some of my boy readers, who have been studying for years and got no farther than this, should think it incredible that Dick, in less than a year, and studying evenings only, should have accomplished it, they must remember that our hero was very much in earnest in his desire to improve. He knew that, in order to grow up respectable, he must be well advanced, and he was willing to work. But then the reader must not forget that Dick was naturally a smart boy. His street education had sharpened his faculties, and taught him to rely upon himself. He knew that it would take him a long time to reach the goal which he had set before him, and he had patience to keep on trying. He knew that he had only himself to depend upon, and he determined to make the most of himself, a resolution which is the secret of success in 9 cases out of 10. "Dick," said Fosdick one evening, after they had completed their studies, "I think you'll have to get another teacher soon." "Why?" asked Dick in some surprise. "Have you been offered a more lucrative position?" "No," said Fosdick, "but I find I have taught you all I know myself. You are now as good a scholar as I am." "Is that true?" said Dick, eagerly, a flush of gratification coloring his brown cheek. "Yes," said Fosdick. "You've made wonderful progress. I propose, now that evening schools have begun, that we join one, and study together through the winter." "All right," said Dick. "I'd be willin' to go now, but when I first began to study I was ashamed to have anybody know that I was so ignorant. Do you really mean, Fosdick, that I know as much as you?" "Yes, Dick, it's true." "Then I've got you to thank for it," said Dick, earnestly. "You've made me what I am." "And haven't you paid me, Dick?" "By payin' the room rent," said Dick, impulsively. "What's that? It isn't half enough. I wish you'd take half my money. You deserve it." "Thank you, Dick, but you're too generous. You've more than paid me. Who was it took my part when all the other boys imposed upon me? And who gave me money to buy clothes, and so got me my situation?" "Oh, that's nothing," said Dick. "It's a great deal, Dick. I shall never forget it. But now it seems to me you might try to get a situation yourself." "Do I know enough?" "You know as much as I do." "Then I'll try," said Dick, decidedly. "I wish there was a place in our store," said Dick. "It would be pleasant for us to be together." "Never mind," said Dick. "There will be plenty of other chances. P'raps A.T. Stewart might like a partner. I wouldn't ask more'n a quarter of the profits." "Which would be a very liberal proposal on your part," said Fosdick, smiling. "But perhaps Mr. Stewart might object to a partner living on Mott Street." "I'd just as lives move to Fifth Avenue," said Dick. "I aint got no prejudices in favor of Mott Street." "Nor I," said Fosdick. "And in fact, I have been thinking it might be a good plan for us to move as soon as we could afford. Mrs. Mooney doesn't keep the room quite so neat as she might." "No," said Dick. "She aint got no prejudices against dirt. Look at that towel." Dick held up the article indicated, which had now seen service nearly a week, and hard service at that, Dick's avocation causing him to be rather hard on towels. "Yes," said Fosdick, "I've got about tired of it. I guess we can find some better place without having to pay much more. When we move, you must let me pay my share of the rent." "We'll see about that," said Dick. "Do you propose to move to Fifth Avenue?" "Not just at present, but to some more agreeable neighborhood than this. We'll wait till you get a situation, and then we can decide." A few days later, as Dick was looking about for customers in the neighborhood of the Park, his attention was drawn to a fellow bootblack, a boy about a year younger than himself, who appeared to have been crying. "What's the matter, Tom?" asked Dick. "Haven't you had luck today?" "Pretty good," said the boy, "but we're having hard times at home. Mother fell last week and broke her arm, and tomorrow we've got to pay the rent, and if we don't, the landlord says he'll turn us out." "Haven't you got anything except what you earn?" asked Dick. "No," said Tom, "not now. Mother used to earn $3 or $4 a week, but she can't do nothing now, and my little sister and brother are too young." Dick had quick sympathies. He had been so poor himself, and obliged to submit to so many privations, that he knew from personal experience how hard it was. Tom Wilkins he knew as an excellent boy, who never squandered his money, but faithfully carried it home to his mother. In the days of his own extravagance and shiftlessness, he had once or twice asked Tom to accompany him to the Old Bowery or Tony Pastor's, but Tom had always steadily refused. "I'm sorry for you, Tom," he said. "How much do you owe for the rent?" "2 weeks now," said Tom. "How much is it a week?" $2 a week. That makes 4. "Have you got anything towards it?" "No, I've had to spend all my money for food for mother and the rest of us. I've had pretty hard work to do that. I don't know what we'll do. I haven't any place to go, and I'm afraid mother'll get cold in her arm." "Can't you borrow the money somewhere?" asked Dick. Tom shook his head despondingly. "All the people I know are as poor as I am," said he. "They'd help me if they could, but it's hard work for them to get along themselves." "I'll tell you what, Tom," said Dick impulsively. "I'll stand your friend." "Have you got any money?" asked Tom doubtfully. "Got any money?" repeated Dick. "Don't you know that I run a bank on my own account? How much is it you need?" $4, said Tom. "If we don't pay that before tomorrow night, out we go. You haven't got as much as that, have you?" "Here are $3, said Dick, drawing out his pocketbook. "I'll let you have the rest tomorrow, and maybe a little more." "You're a right good fellow, Dick," said Tom. "But won't you want it yourself?" "Oh, I've got some more," said Dick. "Maybe I'll never be able to pay you." "Suppose you don't," said Dick. "I guess I won't fail." "I won't forget it, Dick. I hope I'll be able to do something for you sometime." "All right," said Dick. "I'd ought to help you. I haven't got no mother to look out for. I wish I had." There was a tinge of sadness in his tone as he pronounced the last 4 words, but Dick's temperament was sanguine, and he never gave way to unavailing sadness. Accordingly, he began to whistle as he turned away, only adding, "I'll see you tomorrow, Tom." The $3 which Dick had handed to Tom Wilkins were his savings for the present week. It was now Thursday afternoon. His rent, which amounted to $1, he expected to save out of the earnings of Friday and Saturday. In order to give Tom the additional assistance he had promised, Dick would be obliged to have recourse to his bank savings. He would not have ventured to trench upon it for any other reason but this. But he felt that it would be selfish to allow Tom and his mother to suffer when he had it in his power to relieve them. But Dick was destined to be surprised, and that in a disagreeable manner, when he reached home. End of Chapter 20. LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ragged Dick, or Street Life in New York with the Bootblacks, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 21. Dick Loses His Bank Book. It was hinted at the close of the last chapter that Dick was destined to be disagreeably surprised on reaching home. Having agreed to give further assistance to Tom Wilkins, he was naturally led to go to the drawer where he and Fosdick kept their bank books. To his surprise and uneasiness, the drawer proved to be empty. "Come here a minute, Fosdick," he said. "What's the matter, Dick?" "I can't find my bank book, nor yours either. What's come of them?" "I took mine with me this morning, thinking I might want to put in a little more money. I've got it in my pocket now." "But where's mine?" asked Dick, perplexed. "I don't know. I saw it in the drawer when I took mine this morning." "Are you sure?" "Yes, positive, for I looked into it to see how much you had got." "Did you lock it again?" asked Dick. "Yes. Didn't you have to unlock it just now?" "So I did," said Dick. "But it's gone now. Somebody opened it with a key that fitted the lock, and then locked it again." "That must have been the way." "It's rather hard on a feller," said Dick, who for the first time since we became acquainted with him began to feel downhearted. "Don't give it up, Dick. You haven't lost the money, only the bank book." "Ain't that the same thing?" "No. You can go to the bank tomorrow morning, as soon as it opens, and tell them you have lost the book, and ask them not to pay the money to any one except yourself." "So I can," said Dick, brightening up. "That is, if the thief hasn't been to the bank to-day." "If he has, they might detect him by his handwriting." "I'd like to get hold of the one that stole it," said Dick, indignantly. "I'd give him a good lickin'." "It must have been somebody in the house. Suppose we go and see Mrs. Mooney. She may know whether anybody came into our room to-day." The two boys went downstairs, and knocked at the door of a little back sitting-room where Mrs. Mooney generally spent her evenings. It was a shabby little room, with a threadbare carpet on the floor, the walls covered with a certain large-figured paper, patches of which had been stripped off here and there, exposing the plaster, the remainder being defaced by dirt and grease. But Mrs. Mooney had one of those comfortable temperaments which are tolerant of dirt, and didn't mind it in the least. She was seated beside a small pine work-table, industriously engaged in mending stockings. "Good evening, Mrs. Mooney," said Fosdick, politely. "Good evening," said the landlady. "Sit down, if you can find chairs. I'm hard at work, as you see, but a poor lone widder can't afford to be idle." "We can't stop long, Mrs. Mooney, but my friend here has had something taken from his room to-day, and we thought we'd come and see you about it." "What is it?" asked the landlady. "You don't think I'd take anything. If I am poor, it's an honest name I've always had, as all my lodgers can testify." "Certainly not, Mrs. Mooney. But there are others in the house that may not be honest. My friend has lost his bank book. It was safe in the drawer this morning, but to-night it is not to be found." "How much money was there in it?" asked Mrs. Mooney. "Over $100, said Fosdick. "It was my whole fortune," said Dick. "I was going to buy a house next year." Mrs. Mooney was evidently surprised to learn the extent of Dick's wealth, and was disposed to regard him with increased respect. "Was the drawer locked?" she asked. "Yes." "Then it couldn't have been Bridget. I don't think she has any keys." "She wouldn't know what a bank book was," said Fosdick. "You didn't see any of the lodgers go into our room to-day, did you?" "I shouldn't wonder if it was Jim Travis," said Mrs. Mooney, suddenly. This James Travis was a bartender in a low groggery in Mulberry Street, and had been for a few weeks an inmate of Mrs. Mooney's lodging-house. He was a coarse-looking fellow who, from his appearance, evidently patronized liberally the liquor he dealt out to others. He occupied a room opposite Dick's, and was often heard by the two boys reeling upstairs in a state of intoxication, uttering shocking oaths. This Travis had made several friendly overtures to Dick and his room-mate, and had invited them to call round at the bar-room where he tended and take something. But this invitation had never been accepted, partly because the boys were better engaged in the evening, and partly because neither of them had taken a fancy to Mr. Travis, which certainly was not strange, for nature had not gifted him with many charms, either of personal appearance or manners. The rejection of his friendly proffers had caused him to take a dislike to Dick and Henry, whom he considered stiff and unsocial. "What makes you think it was Travis?" asked Fosdick. "He isn't at home in the daytime." "But he was to-day. He said he had a bad cold, and had to come home for a clean handkerchief." "Did you see him?" asked Dick. "Yes," said Mrs. Mooney. "Bridget was out hanging clothes, and I went to the door to let him in." "I wonder if he had a key that would fit our drawer," said Fosdick. "Yes," said Mrs. Mooney. "The bureaus in the two rooms are just alike. I got 'em at auction, and most likely the locks is the same." "It must have been he," said Dick, looking towards Fosdick. "Yes," said Fosdick, "it looks like it." "What's to be done? That's what I'd like to know," said Dick. "Of course he'll say he hasn't got it, and he won't be such a fool as to leave it in his room." "If he hasn't been to the bank, it's all right," said Fosdick. "You can go there the first thing tomorrow morning, and stop their paying any money on it." "But I can't get any money on it myself," said Dick. "I told Tom Wilkins I'd let him have some more money tomorrow, or his sick mother'll have to turn out of their lodgin's." "How much money were you going to give him?" "I gave him $3 today, and was going to give him $2 tomorrow. I've got the money, Dick. I didn't go to the bank this morning." "All right, I'll take it and pay you back next week." "No, Dick, if you've given $3, you must let me give $2." "No, Fosdick, I'd rather give the whole. You know I've got more money than you." "No, I haven't either," said Dick, the memory of his loss flashing upon him. "I thought I was rich this morning, but now I'm in destitute circumstances." "Cheer up, Dick. You'll get your money back." "I hope so," said our hero, rather ruefully. The fact was that our friend Dick was beginning to feel what is so often experienced by men who do business of a more important character and on a larger scale than he, the bitterness of a reverse of circumstances. With $100 and over carefully laid away in the savings bank, he had felt quite independent. Wealth is comparative, and Dick probably felt as rich as many men who are worth $100,000. He was beginning to feel the advantages of his steady self-denial, and to experience the pleasures of property. Not that Dick was likely to be unduly attached to money. Let it be said to his credit that it had never given him so much satisfaction as when it enabled him to help Tom Wilkins in his trouble. Besides this, there was another thought that troubled him. When he obtained a place, he could not expect to receive as much as he was now making from blacking boots, probably not more than $3 a week, while his expenses without clothing would amount to $4. To make up the deficiency, he had confidently relied upon his savings, which would be sufficient to carry him along for a year if necessary. If he should not recover his money, he would be compelled to continue a bootblack for at least 6 months longer, and this was rather a discouraging reflection. On the whole, it is not to be wondered at that Dick felt unusually sober this evening, and that neither of the boys felt much like studying. The two boys consulted as to whether it would be best to speak to Travis about it. It was not altogether easy to decide. Fosdick was opposed to it. "It will only put him on his guard," said he, "and I don't see as it will do any good. Of course he will deny it. We'd better keep quiet and watch him, and by giving notice at the bank we can make sure that he doesn't get any money on it. If he does present himself at the bank, they will know at once that he is a thief, and he can be arrested." This view seemed reasonable, and Dick resolved to adopt it. On the whole, he began to think prospects were brighter than he had at first supposed, and his spirits rose a little. "How'd he know I had any bank book? That's what I can't make out," he said. "Don't you remember?" said Fosdick, after a moment's thought. "We were speaking of our savings 2 or 3 evenings since." "Yes," said Dick. "Our door was a little open at the time, and I heard somebody come upstairs and stop a minute in front of it. It must have been Jim Travis. In that way he probably found out about your money, and took the opportunity today to get hold of it." This might or might not be the correct explanation. At all events, it seemed probable. The boys were just on the point of going to bed later in the evening, when a knock was heard at the door, and to their no little surprise their neighbor Jim Travis proved to be the caller. He was a sallow-complexioned young man, with dark hair and bloodshot eyes. He darted a quick glance from one to the other as he entered, which did not escape the boys' notice.
"How are you tonight?"
he said, sinking into one of the 2 chairs with which the room was scantily furnished. "Jolly," said Dick. "How are you?"
"Tired as a dog,"
was the reply.
"Hard work and poor pay. That's the way with me. I wanted to go to the theater tonight, but I was hard up and couldn't raise the cash."
Here he darted another quick glance at the boys, but neither betrayed anything.
"You don't go out much, do you?" he said.
"Not much," said Fosdick. "We spend our evenings in study." "That's precious slow," said Travis, rather contemptuously.
"What's the use of studying so much? You don't expect to be a lawyer, do you, or anything of that sort?"
"Maybe," said Dick. "I haven't made up my mind yet. If my feller citizens should want me to go to Congress sometime, I shouldn't want to disappoint them, and then readin' and writin' might come handy."
"Well,"
said Travis, rather abruptly,
"I'm tired, and I guess I'll turn in."
"Good night," said Fosdick. The boys looked at each other as their visitor left the room. "He came in to see if we'd missed the bank book," said Dick. "And to turn off suspicion from himself by letting us know he had no money," added Fosdick. "That's so," said Dick. "I'd like to have searched them pockets of his." CHAPTer 21. Chapter 22. Tracking the Thief. Fosdick was right in supposing that Jim Travis had stolen the bank book. He was also right in supposing that that worthy young man had come to the knowledge of Dick's savings by what he had accidentally overheard. Now, Travis, like a very large number of young men of his class, was able to dispose of a larger amount of money than he was able to earn. Moreover, he had no great fancy for work at all, and would have been glad to find some other way of obtaining money enough to pay for his expenses. He had recently received a letter from an old companion, who had strayed out to California, and going at once to the mines had been lucky enough to get possession of a very remunerative claim. He wrote to Travis that he had already realized $2,000 from it, and expected to make his fortune within 6 months. $2,000! This seemed to Travis a very large sum, and quite dazzled his imagination. He was at once inflamed with the desire to go out to California and try his luck. In his present situation he only received $30 a month, which was probably all that his services were worth, but went a very little way toward gratifying his expensive tastes. Accordingly, he determined to take the next steamer to the land of gold, if he could possibly manage to get enough to pay for the passage. The price of a steerage passage at that time was $75. Not a large sum, certainly, but it might as well have been $7,500 for any chance Jim Travis had of raising the amount at present. His available funds consisted of precisely $2.25, of which sum $1.50 were due to his washerwoman. This, however, would not have troubled Travis much, and he would conveniently have forgotten all about it. But, even leaving this debt unpaid, the sum at his command would not help him materially towards paying his passage money. Travis applied for help to 2 or 3 of his companions, but they were all of that kind who never keep an account with savings banks, and carry all their spare cash about with them. One of these friends offered to lend him 37 cents, and another $1, but neither of these offers seemed to encourage him much. He was about giving up his project in despair, when he learned accidentally, as we have already said, the extent of Dick's savings. $117! Why, that would not only pay his passage, but carry him up to the mines after he had arrived in San Francisco. He could not help thinking it over, and the result of this thinking was that he determined to borrow it of Dick without leave. Knowing that neither of the boys were in their room in the daytime, he came back in the course of the morning, and being admitted by Mrs. Mooney herself, said, by way of accounting for his presence, that he had a cold, and had come back for a handkerchief. The landlady suspected nothing, and returning at once to her work in the kitchen, left the coast clear. Travis at once entered Dick's room, and as there seemed to be no other place for depositing money, tried the bureau drawers. They were all readily opened except one, which proved to be locked. This he naturally concluded must contain the money, and going back to his own chamber for the key of the bureau, tried it on his return, and found to his satisfaction that it would fit. When he discovered the bank book, his joy was mingled with disappointment. He had expected to find bank bills instead. This would have saved all further trouble, and would have been immediately available. Obtaining money at the savings bank would involve fresh risk. Travis hesitated whether to take it or not, but finally decided that it would be worth the trouble and hazard. He accordingly slipped the book into his pocket, locked the drawer again, and forgetting all about the handkerchief for which he had come home, went downstairs and into the street. There would have been time to go to the savings bank that day, but Travis had already been absent from his place of business some time, and did not venture to take the additional time required. Besides, not being very much used to savings banks, never having had occasion to use them, he thought it would be more prudent to look over the rules and regulations, and see if he could not get some information as to the way he ought to proceed. So the day passed, and Dick's money was left in safety at the bank. In the evening it occurred to Travis that it might be well to find out whether Dick had discovered his loss. This reflection it was that induced the visit which is recorded at the close of the last chapter. The result was that he was misled by the boy's silence on the subject, and concluded that nothing had yet been discovered.
Good, thought Travis with satisfaction. If they don't find out for 24 hours, it'll be too late then, and I shall be all right.
There being a possibility of the loss being discovered before the boys went out in the morning, Travis determined to see them at that time, and judge whether such was the case. He waited, therefore, until he heard the boys come out, and then opened his own door.
"Morning, gents," said he, sociably. "Going to business?"
"Yes," said Dick. "I'm afraid my clerks will be lazy if I ain't on hand."
"Good joke," said Travis. "If you pay good wages, I'd like to speak for a place."
"I pay all I get myself," said Dick. "How's business with you?"
"So. Why don't you call round sometime?"
"All my evenings is devoted to literature and science," said Dick. "Thank you all the same."
"Where do you hang out?"
inquired Travis, in choice language, addressing Fosdick. "At Henderson's hat and cap store on Broadway."
"I'll look in upon you some time when I want a tile," said Travis. "I suppose you sell cheaper to your friends."
"I'll be as reasonable as I can," said Fosdick, not very cordially, for he did not much fancy having it supposed by his employer that such a disreputable-looking person as Travis was a friend of his. However, Travis had no idea of showing himself at the Broadway store, and only said this by way of making conversation and encouraging the boys to be social.
"You haven't any of your gents seen a pearl-handled knife, have you?" he asked.
"No," said Fosdick. "Have you lost one?"
"Yes," said Travis, with unblushing falsehood. "I left it on my bureau a day or two since. I've missed one or two other little matters. Bridget don't look to me any too honest. Likely she's got 'em."
"What are you going to do about it?" asked Dick.
"I'll keep mum, unless I lose something more, and then I'll kick up a row and haul her over the coals. Have you missed anything?"
"No," said Fosdick, answering for himself as he could do without violating the truth. There was a gleam of satisfaction in the eyes of Travis as he heard this.
"They haven't found it out yet," he thought. "I'll bag the money to-day, and then they may whistle for it."
Having no further object to serve in accompanying the boys, he bade them good morning, and turned down another street. "He's mighty friendly all of a sudden," said Dick. "Yes," said Fosdick. "It's very evident what it all means. He wants to find out whether you have discovered your loss or not." "But he didn't find out." "No. We've put him on the wrong track. He means to get his money to-day, no doubt." "My money," suggested Dick. "I accept the correction," said Fosdick. "Of course, Dick, you'll be on hand as soon as the bank opens." "In course I shall. Jim Travis will find he's walked into the wrong shop." "The bank opens at 10 o'clock, you know." "I'll be there on time." The two boys separated. "Good luck, Dick," said Fosdick as he parted from him. "It'll all come out right, I think." "I hope 'twill," said Dick. He had recovered from his temporary depression, and made up his mind that the money would be recovered. He had no idea of allowing himself to be outwitted by Jim Travis, and enjoyed already in anticipation the pleasure of defeating his rascality. It wanted 2 hours and a half yet to 10 o'clock, and this time to Dick was too precious to be wasted. It was the time of his greatest harvest. He accordingly repaired to his usual place of business, succeeded in obtaining 6 customers, which yielded him 60 cents. He then went to a restaurant and got some breakfast. It was now 9:30, and Dick, feeling that it wouldn't do to be late, left his box in charge of Jimmy Nolan, and made his way to the bank. The officers had not yet arrived, and Dick lingered on the outside, waiting till they should come. He was not without a little uneasiness, fearing that Travis might be as prompt as himself, and finding him there might suspect something, and so escape the snare. But, looking cautiously up and down the street, he could discover no traces of the supposed thief. In due time 10 o'clock struck, and immediately afterwards the doors of the bank were thrown open, and our hero entered. As Dick had been in the habit of making a weekly visit for the last 9 months, The cashier had come to know him by sight.
"You're early this morning, my lad," he said pleasantly. "Have you got some more money to deposit? You'll be getting rich soon."
"I don't know about that," said Dick. "My bank book's been stole."
"Stolen?" echoed the cashier. "That's unfortunate. Not so bad as it might be, though. The thief can't collect the money."
"That's what I come to see about," said Dick. "I was afraid he might have got it already."
"He hasn't been here. Even if he had, I remember you, and should have detected him. When was it taken?"
"Yesterday," said Dick. "I missed it in the evening when I got home."
"Have you any suspicion as to the person who took it?"
asked the cashier. Dick thereupon told him all he knew as to the general character and suspicious conduct of Jim Travis, and the cashier agreed with him that he was probably the thief. Dick also gave his reason for thinking that he would visit the bank that morning to withdraw the funds.
"Very good," said the cashier. "We'll be ready for him. What is the number of your book?"
"Number 5678, said Dick.
"Now, give me a little description of this Travis whom you suspect."
Dick accordingly furnished a brief outline sketch of Travis, not particularly complimentary to the latter.
"That will answer. I think I shall know him," said the cashier. "You may depend upon it that he shall receive no money on your account."
"Thank you," said Dick. Considerably relieved in mind, our hero turned toward the door, thinking that there would be nothing gained by his remaining longer, while he would of course lose time. He had just reached the doors, which were of glass, when through them he perceived James Travis himself just crossing the street, and apparently coming towards the bank. It would not do, of course, for him to be seen. "Here he is!" he exclaimed, hurrying back. "Can't you hide me somewhere? I don't want to be seen." The cashier understood at once how the land lay. He quickly opened a little door and admitted Dick behind the counter.
"Stoop down," he said, "so as not to be seen."
Dick had hardly done so when Jim Travis opened the outer door, and looking about him in a little uncertainty, walked up to the cashier's desk. End of chapter 22. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ragged Dick, or Street Life in New York with the Bootblacks, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 23. Travis is Arrested. Jim Travis advanced into the bank with a doubtful step, knowing well that he was on a dishonest errand, and heartily wishing that he were well out of it. After a little hesitation, he approached the paying teller, and exhibiting the bank book, said,
"I want to get my money out."
The bank officer took the book, and after looking at it a moment, said,
"How much do you want?"
"The whole of it,"
said Travis. "You can draw out any part of it, but to draw out the whole requires a week's notice."
"Then I'll take $100.
"Are you the person to whom the book belongs?"
"Yes, sir,"
said Travis, without hesitation.
"Your name is?"
"Hunter."
The bank clerk went to a large folio volume, containing the names of depositors, and began to turn over the leaves. While he was doing this, he managed to send out a young man connected with the bank for a policeman. Travis did not perceive this, or did not suspect that it had anything to do with himself. Not being used to savings banks, he supposed the delay only what was usual. After a search, which was only intended to gain time that a policeman might be summoned, the cashier came back, and sliding out a piece of paper to Travis, said, "It will be necessary for you to write out an order for the money." Travis took a pen, which he found on the ledge outside, and wrote the order, signing his name Dick Hunter, having observed that name on the outside of the book. "Your name is Dick Hunter, then?" said the cashier, taking the paper and looking at the thief over his spectacles.
"Yes," said Travis promptly.
"But," continued the cashier, "I find Hunter's age is put down on the bank book at 14. Surely you must be more than that."
Travis would gladly have declared that he was only 14, but being in reality 23, and possessing a luxuriant pair of whiskers, this was not to be thought of. He began to feel uneasy.
"Dick Hunter's my younger brother," he said. "I'm getting out the money for him."
"I thought you said your own name was Dick Hunter," said the cashier.
"I said my name was Hunter," said Travis ingeniously. "I didn't understand you."
"But you've signed the name of Dick Hunter to this order. How is that?" questioned the troublesome cashier.
Travis saw that he was getting himself into a tight place, but his self-possession did not desert him.
"I thought I must give my brother's name," he answered.
"What is your own name?"
"Henry Hunter."
"Can you bring anyone to testify that the statement you are making is correct?"
"Yes, a dozen if you like," said Travis boldly. "Give me the book, and I'll come back this afternoon. I didn't think there'd be such a fuss about getting out a little money."
"Wait a moment. Why don't your brother come himself?"
"Because he's sick. He's down with the measles," said Travis.
Here the cashier signed to Dick to rise and show himself. Our hero accordingly did so.
"You will be glad to find that he has recovered,"
said the cashier, pointing to Dick. With an exclamation of anger and dismay, Travis, who saw the game was up, started for the door, feeling that safety made such a course prudent. But he was too late. He found himself confronted by a burly policeman, who seized him by the arm, saying,
"Not so fast, my man. I want you." "Let me go,"
exclaimed Travis, struggling to free himself.
"I'm sorry I can't oblige you," said the officer. "You'd better not make a fuss, or I may have to hurt you a little."
Travis sullenly resigned himself to his fate, darting a look of rage at Dick, whom he considered the author of his present misfortune.
"This is your book,"
said the cashier, handing back his rightful property to our hero.
"Do you wish to draw out any money?"
$2, said Dick.
"Very well. Write an order for the amount."
Before doing so, Dick, who now that he saw Travis in the power of the law began to pity him, went up to the officer and said, "Won't you let him go? I've got my bank book back, and I don't want anything done to him."
"Sorry I can't oblige you," said the officer, "but I'm not allowed to do it. He'll have to stand his trial."
"I'm sorry for you, Travis," said Dick. "I didn't want you arrested. I only wanted my bank book back."
"Curse you," said Travis, scowling vindictively. "Wait till I get free. See if I don't fix you." "You needn't pity him too much," said the officer. "I know him now. He's been to the island before." "It's a lie," said Travis violently. "Don't be too noisy, my friend," said the officer. "If you've got no more business here, we'll be going." He withdrew with the prisoner in charge, and Dick, having drawn his $2, left the bank. Notwithstanding the violent words the prisoner had used towards himself, and his attempted robbery, he could not help feeling sorry that he had been instrumental in causing his arrest. "I'll keep my book a little safer hereafter," thought Dick. "Now I must go and see Tom Wilkins." Before dismissing the subject of Travis and his theft, it may be remarked that he was duly tried, and his guilt being clear, was sent to Blackwell's Island for 9 months. At the end of that time, on his release, he got a chance to work his passage on a ship to San Francisco, where he probably arrived in due time. At any rate, nothing more has been heard of him, and probably his threat of vengeance against Dick will never be carried into effect. Returning to the City Hall Park, Dick soon fell in with Tom Wilkins. "How are you, Tom?" he said. "How's your mother?" "She's better, Dick. Thank you. She felt worried about being turned out into the street, but I gave her that money from you, and now she feels a good deal easier." "I've got some more money for you, Tom," said Dick, producing a $2 bill from his pocket. "I ought not to take it from you, Dick." "Oh, it's all right, Tom. Don't be afraid." "But you may need it yourself." "There's plenty more where that came from." "Anyway, $1 will be enough. With that we can pay the rent." "You'll want the other to buy something to eat." "You're very kind, Dick." "I'd ought to be. I've only got myself to take care of." "Well,
I'll just take it for my mother's sake. When you want anything done, just call on Tom Wilkins." "All right. Next week, if your mother doesn't get better, I'll give you some more." Tom thanked our hero very gratefully, and Dick walked away, feeling the self-approval which always accompanies a generous and disinterested action. He was generous by nature, and before the period at which is introduced to the reader's notice, he frequently treated his friends to cigars and oyster stews. Sometimes he invited them to accompany him to the theater at his expense, but he never derived from these acts of liberality the same degree of satisfaction as from this timely gift to Tom Wilkins. He felt that his money was well bestowed, and would save an entire family from privation and discomfort. $5 would, to be sure, make something of a difference in the amount of his savings. It was more than he was able to save up in a week. But Dick felt fully repaid for what he had done, and he felt prepared to give as much more, if Tom's mother should continue to be sick, and should appear to him to need it. Besides all this, Dick felt a justifiable pride in his financial ability to afford so handsome a gift. A year before, however much he would have desired to give, it would have been quite out of his power to give $5. His cash balance never reached that amount. It was seldom, indeed, that it equaled $1. In more ways than one, Dick was beginning to reap the advantage of his self-denial and judicious economy. It will be remembered that when Mr. Whitney, at parting with Dick, presented him with $5, he told him that he might repay it to some other boy who was struggling upward. Dick thought of this, and it occurred to him that after all he was only paying up an old debt. When Fosdick came home in the evening, Dick announced his success in recovering his lost money, and described the manner it had been brought about. "You're in luck," said Fosdick. "I guess we'd better not trust the bureau drawer again." "I mean to carry my book around with me," said Dick. "So shall I, as long as we stay at Mrs. Mooney's. I wish we were in a better place." "I must go down and tell her she needn't expect Travis back. Poor chap, I pity him." Travis was never more seen in Mrs. Mooney's establishment. He was owing that lady for a fortnight's rent of his room, which prevented her feeling much compassion for him. The room was soon after let to a more creditable tenant, who proved a less troublesome neighbor than his predecessor. Chapter 23. Chapter 24. Dick receives a letter. It was about a week after Dick's recovery of his bank book that Fosdick brought home with him in the evening a copy of the Daily Sun. "Would you like to see your name in print, Dick?" he asked. "Yes," said Dick, who was busy at the washstand, endeavoring to efface the marks which his day's work had left upon his hands. "They haven't put me up for mayor, have they? 'Cause if they have, I shan't accept. It would interfere too much with my private business." "No," said Fosdick, "they haven't put you up for office yet, though it may happen sometime. But if you want to see your name in print, here it is." Dick was rather incredulous, but having dried his hands on the towel, took the paper, and following the directions of Fosdick's finger, observed in the list of advertised letters the name of Ragged Dick. "By gracious, so it is," said he. "Do you suppose it means me?" "I don't know of any other Ragged Dick. Do you?" "No," said Dick reflectively. "It must be me. But I don't know of anybody that would be likely to write to me." "Perhaps it is Frank Whitney," suggested Fosdick, after a little reflection. "Didn't he promise to write to you?" "Yes," said Dick, "and he wanted me to write to him." "Where is he now?" "He was going to a boarding school in Connecticut, he said. The name of the town was Barnton." "Very likely the letter is from him." "I hope it is. Frank was a tip-top boy, and he was the first that made me ashamed of being so ignorant and dirty." "You had better go to the post office tomorrow morning and ask for the letter." "Perhaps they won't give it to me." "Suppose you wear the old clothes you used to a year ago, when Frank first saw you. They won't have any doubt of your being Ragged Dick then." "I guess I will. I'll be sort of ashamed to be seen in 'em, though," said Dick, who had considerable more pride in a neat personal appearance than when we were first introduced to him. "It will only be for one day, or one morning," said Fosdick. "I'd do more'n that for the sake of getting a letter from Frank. I'd like to see him." The next morning, in accordance with the suggestion of Fosdick, Dick arrayed himself in the long disused Washington coat and Napoleon pants, which he had carefully preserved, for what reason he could hardly explain. When fairly equipped, Dick surveyed himself in the mirror, if the little 7x9-inch looking-glass with which the room was furnished deserved the name. The result of the survey was not on the whole a pleasing one. To tell the truth, Dick was quite ashamed of his appearance, and on opening the chamber door, looked around to see that the coast was clear, not being willing to have any of his fellow boarders see him in his present attire. He managed to slip out into the street unobserved, and after attending to 2 or 3 regular customers who came downtown early in the morning, he made his way down Nassau Street to the post office. He passed along until he came to a compartment on which read, "Advertised Letters," and stepping up to the little window said, "There's a letter for me. I saw it advertised in the Sun yesterday."
"What name?"
demanded the clerk. "Ragged Dick," answered our hero.
"That's a queer name," said the clerk, surveying him a little curiously. "Are you Ragged Dick?"
"If you don't believe me, look at my clothes," said Dick.
"That's pretty good proof, certainly," said the clerk, laughing. "If that isn't your name, it deserves to be."
"I believe in dressin' up to your name," said Dick.
"Do you know any one in Barnton, Connecticut?" asked the clerk, who had by this time found the letter.
"Yes," said Dick. "I know a chap that's at boardin' school there."
"It appears to be in a boy's hand. I think it must be yours."
The letter was handed to Dick through the window. He received it eagerly, and drawing back so as not to be in the way of the throng who were constantly applying for letters, or slipping them into the boxes provided for them, hastily opened it, and began to read. As the reader may be interested in the contents of the letter as well as Dick, we transcribe it below. It was dated Barnton, Connecticut, and commenced thus: "Dear Dick, you must excuse my addressing this letter to Ragged Dick, but the fact is, I don't know what your last name is, nor where you live. I am afraid there is not much chance of your getting this letter, but I hope you will. I have thought of you very often, and wondered how you were getting along, and I should have written to you before if I had known where to direct. Let me tell you a little about myself. Barnton is a very pretty country town, only about 6 miles from Hartford. The boarding school which I attend is under the charge of Ezekiel Monroe, A.M. He is a man of about 50, a graduate of Yale College, and has always been a teacher. It is a large 2-story house, with an addition containing a good many small bedchambers for the boys. There are about 20 of us, and there is one assistant teacher who teaches the English branches. Mr. Monroe, or Old Zeke as we call him behind his back, teaches Latin and Greek. I am studying both these languages, because father wants me to go to college. But you won't be interested in hearing about our studies. I will tell you how we amuse ourselves. There are about 50 acres of land belonging to Mr. Monroe, so that we have plenty of room for play. About 1/4 of a mile from the house there is a good-sized pond. There is a large, round-bottomed boat, which is stout and strong. Every Wednesday and Saturday afternoon, when the weather is good, we go out rowing on the pond. Mr. Barton, the assistant teacher, goes with us to look after us. In the summer we are allowed to go in bathing. In the winter there is splendid skating on the pond. Besides this, we play ball a good deal, and we have various other plays. So we have a pretty good time, although we study pretty hard, too. I am getting on very well in my studies. Father has not decided yet where he will send me to college. I wish you were here, Dick. I should enjoy your company, and besides I should like to feel that you are getting an education. I think you are naturally a pretty smart boy. But I suppose, as you have to earn your own living, you don't get much chance to learn. I only wish I had a few $100s of my own. I would have you come up here and attend school with us. If I ever have a chance to help you in any way, you may be sure that I will. I shall have to wind up my letter now, as I have to hand in a composition tomorrow, on the life and character of Washington. I might say that I have a friend who wears a coat that once belonged to the general, but I suppose that coat must be worn out by this time. I don't much like writing compositions. I would a good deal rather write letters. I have written a longer letter than I meant to. I hope you will get it, though I am afraid not. If you do, you must be sure to answer it as soon as possible. You needn't mind if your writing does look like hen's tracks, as you told me once. Good-bye, Dick. You must always think of me as your very true friend, Frank Whitney. Dick read this letter with much satisfaction. It is always pleasant to be remembered, and Dick had so few friends that it was more to him than to boys who are better provided. Again he felt a new sense of importance in having a letter addressed to him. It was the first letter he had ever received. If it had been sent to him a year before, he would not have been able to read it. But now, thanks to Fosdick's instructions, he could not only read writing, but he could write a very good hand himself. There was one passage in the letter which pleased Dick. It was where Frank said that if he had the money he would pay for his education himself. "He's a tip-top feller," said Dick. "I wish I could see him again." There were two reasons why Dick would have liked to have seen Frank. One was the natural pleasure he would have in meeting a friend, but he felt also that he would like to have Frank witness the improvement he had made in his studies and mode of life. "He'd find me a little more spectable than when he first saw me," thought Dick. Dick had by this time got up to Printing House Square. Standing on Spruce Street near the Tribune office was his old enemy, Micky Maguire. It has already been said that Micky felt a natural enmity towards those in his own condition in life who wore better clothes than himself. For the last 9 months, Dick's neat appearance had excited the ire of the young Philistine. To appear in neat attire and with a clean face, Micky felt was a piece of presumption, and an assumption of superiority on the part of our hero, and he termed it "tryin' to be a swell." Now his astonished eyes rested on Dick in his ancient attire, which was very similar to his own. It was a moment of triumph to him. He felt that pride had had a fall, and he could not forbear reminding Dick of it. "Them's nice clothes you've got on," said he, sarcastically, as Dick came up. "Yes," said Dick promptly. "I've been employin' your tailor. If my face was only dirty, we'd be taken for twin brothers." "So you've given up tryin' to be a swell?" "Only for this particular occasion," said Dick. "I wanted to make a fashionable call, so I put on my regimentals." "I don't believe you've got any better clothes," said Micky. "All right," said Dick. "I won't charge you nothin' for what you believe." Here a customer presented himself for Micky, and Dick went back to his room to change his clothes before resuming business. End of chapter 24. It's a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ragged Dick, or Street Life in New York with the Bootblacks, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 25. Dick Writes His First Letter. When Fosdick reached home in the evening, Dick displayed his letter with some pride. "It's a nice letter," said Fosdick, after reading it. "I should like to know Frank." "I'll bet you would," said Dick. "He's a trump." "When are you going to answer it?" "I don't know," said Dick dubiously. "I never writ a letter." "There's no reason why you shouldn't. There's always a first time, you know." "I don't know what to say," said Dick. "Get some paper and sit down to it, and you'll find enough to say. You can do that this evening instead of studying." "If you'll look it over afterward, and shine it up a little." "Yes, if it needs it. But I rather think Frank would like it best just as you wrote it." Dick decided to adopt Fosdick's suggestion. He had very serious doubts as to his ability to write a letter. Like a good many other boys, he looked upon it as a very serious job, not reflecting that, after all, letter writing is nothing but talking upon paper. Still, in spite of his misgivings, he felt that the letter ought to be answered, and he wished Frank to hear from him. After various preparations, he at last got settled down to his task, and before the evening was over, a letter was written. As the first letter which Dick had ever produced, and because it was characteristic of him, my readers may like to hear it. Here it is. Dear Frank, I got your letter this mornin', and was very glad to hear you hadn't forgotten Ragged Dick. I ain't so ragged as I was. Open-work coats and trousers has gone out of fashion. I put on the Washington coat and Napoleon pants to go to the post office, for I fear they wouldn't think I was the boy that was meant. On my way back, I received the congratulations of my intimate friend Micky Maguire on my improved appearance. I've give up sleepin' in boxes and old wagons, findin' it didn't agree with my constitution. I've hired a room in Mott Street, and have got a private tutor, who rooms with me and looks after my studies in the evening. Mott Street ain't very fashionable, but my mansion on Fifth Avenue isn't finished yet, and I'm afraid it won't be till I'm a gray-haired veteran. I've got $100 towards it, which I've saved up from my earnin's. I haven't forgot what you and your uncle said to me, and I'm trying to grow up spectable. I haven't been to Tony Pastor's or the Old Bowery for ever so long. I'd rather save up my money to support me in my old age. When my hair gets gray, I'm going to knock off blacking boots and go into some light genteel employment, such as keeping an apple stand or disseminating peanuts among the people. I've got so as to read pretty well, so my tutor says. I've been studying geography and grammar also. I've made such astonishing progress that I can tell a noun from a conjunction as far away as I can see 'em. Tell Mr. Monroe that if he wants an accomplished teacher in his school, he can send for me, and I'll come on by the very next train. Or if he wants to sell out for $100, I'll buy the whole concern, and agree to teach the scholars all I know myself in less than 6 months. Is teaching as good business, generally speaking, as blacking boots? My private tutor combines both, and is making a fortune with great rapidity. He'll be as rich as Astor some time, if only he lives long enough. I should think you'd have a bully time at your school. I should like to go out in the boat, or play ball with you. When are you coming to the city? I wish you'd write and let me know when you do, and I'll call and see you. I'll leave my business in the hands of my numerous clerks, and go round with you. There's lots of things you didn't see when you was here before. They're getting on fast at Central Park. It looks better than it did a year ago. I ain't much used to writing letters. As this is the first one I ever wrote, I hope you'll excuse the mistakes. I hope you'll write to me again soon. I can't write so good a letter as you, but I'll do my best, as the man said when he was asked if he could swim over to Brooklyn backwards. Goodbye, Frank. Thank you for all your kindness. Direct your next letter to North Mott Street. Your true friend, Dick Hunter. When Dick had written the last word, he leaned back in his chair and surveyed the letter with much satisfaction. "I didn't think I could have wrote such a long letter, Fosdick," said he. "Written would have been more grammatical, Dick," suggested his friend. "I guess there's plenty of mistakes in it," said Dick. "Just look at it and see." Fosdick took the letter and read it over carefully. "Yes, there are some mistakes," he said. "But it sounds so much like you that I think it would be better to let it go just as it is. It will be more likely to remind Frank of what you were when he first saw you." "Is it good enough to send?" asked Dick anxiously. "Yes. It seems to me quite a good letter. It is written just as you talk. Nobody but you could have written such a letter, Dick. I think Frank will be amused at your proposal to come up there as a teacher. Perhaps it would be a good idea for us to open a select school here in Mott Street," said Dick humorously. "We could call it Professor Fosdick and Hunter's Mott Street Seminary, bootblack and taught by Professor Hunter." The evening was so far advanced that Dick decided to postpone copying his letter till the next evening. By this time he had come to have a very fair handwriting, so that when the letter was complete it really looked quite creditable, and no one would have suspected that it was Dick's first attempt in this line. Our hero surveyed it with no little complacency. In fact, he felt rather proud of it, since it reminded him of the great progress he had made. He carried it down to the post office and deposited it with his own hands in the proper box. Just on the steps of the building as he was coming out, he met Johnny Nolan, who had been sent on an errand to Wall Street by some gentleman, and was just returning.
"What are you doing down here, Dick?"
asked Johnny. "I've been mailing a letter."
"Who sent you?"
"Nobody."
"I mean, who writ the letter?"
"I wrote it myself."
"Can you write letters?"
asked Johnny in amazement. "Why shouldn't I?"
"I didn't know you could write. I can't."
"Then you ought to learn."
"I went to school once, but it was too hard work, so I give it up."
"You're lazy, Johnny. That's what's the matter. How'd you ever expect to know anything if you don't try?"
"I can't learn."
"You can if you want to." Johnny Nolan was evidently of a different opinion. He was a good-natured boy, large of his age, with nothing particularly bad about him, but utterly lacking in that energy, ambition, and natural sharpness, for which Dick was distinguished. He was not adapted to succeed in the life which circumstances had forced upon him, for in the street life of the metropolis a boy needs to be on the alert, and have all his wits about him, or he will find himself wholly distanced by his more enterprising competitors for popular favor. To succeed in his profession, humble as it is, a bootblack must depend upon the same qualities which gain success in higher walks in life. It was easy to see that Johnny, unless very much favored by circumstances, would never rise much above his present level. For Dick we cannot hoping much better things. End of chapter 25. Chapter 26. An exciting adventure. Dick now began to look about for a position in a store or counting room. Until he should obtain one, he determined to devote half the day to blacking boots, not being willing to break in upon his small capital. He found that he could earn enough in half a day to pay all his necessary expenses, including the entire rent of the room. Fosdick desired to pay his half, but Dick steadily refused, insisting upon paying so much as compensation for his friend's services as instructor. It should be added that Dick's peculiar way of speaking and use of slang terms had been somewhat modified by his education and his intimacy with Henry Fosdick. Still, he continued to indulge in them to some extent, especially when he felt like joking, and it was natural to Dick to joke, as my readers have probably found out by this time. Still, his manners were considerably improved, so that he was more likely to obtain a situation than when first introduced to our notice. Just now, however, business was very dull, and merchants, instead of hiring new assistants, were disposed to part with those already in their employ. After making several ineffectual applications, Dick began to think he should be obliged to stick to his profession until the next season. But about this time something occurred which considerably improved his chances of preferment. This is the way it happened. As Dick, with the balance of more than $100 in the savings bank, might fairly consider himself a young man of property, he thought himself justified in occasionally taking a half holiday from business and going on an excursion. On Wednesday afternoon, Henry Fosdick was sent by his employer on an errand to that part of Brooklyn near Greenwood Cemetery. Dick hastily dressed himself in his best and determined to accompany him. The two boys walked down to the South Ferry, and paying their 2 cents each, entered the ferry boat. They remained at the stern and stood by the railing, watching the great city with its crowded wharves receding from view. Beside them was a gentleman with 2 children, a girl of 8 and a little boy of 6. The children were talking gaily to their father. While he was pointing out some object of interest to the little girl, the boy managed to creep, unobserved, beneath the chain that extends across the boat, for the protection of the passengers, and stepping incautiously to the edge of the boat, fell over into the foaming water. At the child's scream the father looked up, and with a cry of horror sprang to the edge of the boat. He would have plunged in, but, being unable to swim, would only have endangered his own life without being able to save his child.
"My child!" he exclaimed in anguish. "Who will save my child? $1,000, $10,000 to anyone who will save him!"
There chanced to be but few passengers on board at the time, and nearly all these were either in the cabins or standing forward. Among the few who saw the child fall was our hero. Now Dick was an expert swimmer. It was an accomplishment which he had possessed for years, and he no sooner saw the boy fall than he resolved to rescue him. His determination was formed before he heard the liberal offer made by the boy's father. Indeed, I must do Dick the justice to say that, in the excitement of the moment, he did not hear it at all, nor would it have stimulated the alacrity with which he sprang to the rescue of the little boy. Little Johnny had already risen once and gone under for the second time, when our hero plunged in. He was obliged to strike out for the boy, and this took time. He reached him none too soon. Just as he was sinking for the third and last time, he caught him by the jacket. Dick was stout and strong, but Johnny clung to him so tightly that it was with great difficulty he was able to sustain himself. "Put your arms around my neck," said Dick. The little boy mechanically obeyed, and clung with a grasp strengthened by his terror. In this position Dick could bear his weight better. But the ferry boat was receding fast. It was quite impossible to reach it. The father, his face pale with terror and anguish, and his hands clasped in suspense, saw the brave boy's struggles, and prayed with agonizing fervor that he might be successful. But it is probable, for they were now midway of the river, that both Dick and the little boy whom he had bravely undertaken to rescue would have been drowned, had not a rowboat been fortunately near. The two men who were in it witnessed the accident, and hastened to the rescue of our hero.
"Keep up a little longer," they shouted, bending to their oars, "and we will save you."
Dick heard the shout, and it put fresh strength into him. He battled manfully with the treacherous sea, his eyes fixed longingly upon the approaching boat. "Hold on tight, little boy," he said. "There's a boat coming." The little boy did not see the boat. His eyes were closed to shut out the fearful water, but he clung the closer to his young preserver. 6 long, steady strokes, and the boat dashed alongside. Strong hands seized Dick and his youthful burden, and drew them into the boat, both dripping with water. "God be thanked!" exclaimed the father, as from the steamer he saw the child's rescue. "That brave boy shall be rewarded, if I sacrifice my whole fortune to compass it." "You've had a pretty narrow escape, young chap," said one of the boatmen to Dick. "It was a pretty tough job you undertook." "Yes," said Dick. "That's what I thought when I was in the water. If it hadn't been for you, I don't know what would have come of us." "Anyhow, you're a plucky boy, or you wouldn't have dared to jump into the water after this little chap. It was a risky thing to do." "I'm used to the water," said Dick modestly. "I didn't stop to think of the danger. But I wasn't going to see that little fellow drown without trying to save him." The boat at once headed for the ferry wharf on the Brooklyn side. The captain of the ferry boat, seeing the rescue, did not think it necessary to stop his boat, but kept on his way. The whole occurrence took place in less time than I have occupied in telling it. The father was waiting on the wharf to receive his little boy, with what feelings of gratitude and joy can be easily understood. With a burst of happy tears he clasped him in his arms. Dick was about to withdraw modestly, but the gentleman perceived the movement, and putting down the child came forward, and clasping his hand, said with emotion, "My brave boy, I owe you a debt I can never repay. But for your timely service, I should now be plunged into an anguish which I cannot think of without a shudder." Our hero was ready enough to speak on most occasions, but always felt awkward when he was praised. "It wasn't any trouble," he said modestly. "I can swim like a top." "But not many boys would have risked their lives for a stranger," said the gentleman. "But," he added with a sudden thought, as his glance rested on Dick's dripping garments, "both you and my little boy will take cold in wet clothes. Fortunately, I have a friend living close at hand, at whose house you will have an opportunity of taking off your clothes and having them dried." Dick protested that he never took cold, but Fosdick, who had now joined them, and who, it is needless to say, had been greatly alarmed at Dick's danger, joined in urging compliance with the gentleman's proposal, and in the end our hero had to yield. His new friend secured a hack, the driver of which agreed for extra recompense to receive the dripping boys into his carriage, and they were whirled rapidly to a pleasant house in a side street, where matters were quickly explained, and both boys were put to bed. "I ain't used to going to bed quite so early," thought Dick. "This is the queerest excursion I ever took." Like most active boys, Dick did not enjoy the prospect of spending half a day in bed, but his confinement did not last as long as he anticipated. In about an hour the door of his chamber was opened, and a servant appeared, bringing a new and handsome suit of clothes throughout. "You are to put on these," said the servant to Dick, "but you needn't get up till you feel like it." "Whose clothes are they?" asked Dick. "They are yours." "Mine? Where did they come from?" "Mr. Rockwell sent out and bought them for you. They are the same size as your wet ones." "Is he here now?" "No. He bought another suit for the little boy and has gone back to New York. Here's a note he asked me to give you." Dick opened the paper and read as follows: "Please accept this outfit of clothes as the first installment of a debt which I can never repay. I have asked to have your wet suit dried, when you can reclaim it. Will you oblige me by calling tomorrow at my counting room, No. Pearl Street. Your friend, James Rockwell." End of chapter 26. Chapter 27. Conclusion. When Dick was dressed in his new suit, he surveyed his figure with pardonable complacency. It was the best he had ever worn, and fitted him as well as if it had been made expressly for him. "He's done the handsome thing," said Dick to himself. "But there wasn't no occasion for his giving me these clothes. My lucky stars are shinin' pretty bright now. Jumpin' into the water pays better than shinin' boots. But I don't think I'd like to try it more'n once a week." About 11 o'clock the next morning, Dick repaired to Mr. Rockwell's counting room on Pearl Street. He found himself in front of a large and handsome warehouse. The counting room was on the lower floor. Our hero entered, and found Mr. Rockwell sitting at a desk. No sooner did that gentleman see him than he arose, and advancing, shook Dick by the hand in the most friendly manner.
"My young friend," he said, "you have done me so great a service that I wish to be of some service to you in return. Tell me about yourself, and what plans or wishes you have formed for the future."
Dick frankly related his past history, and told Mr. Rockwell of his desire to get into a store or counting room, and of the failure of all his applications thus far. The merchant listened attentively to Dick's statement, and when he had finished, placed a sheet of paper before him, and handing him a pen, said,
"Will you write your name on this piece of paper?"
Dick wrote in a free, bold hand the name Richard Hunter. He had very much improved in his penmanship, as has already been mentioned, and now had no cause to be ashamed of it. Mr. Rockwell surveyed it approvingly.
"How would you like to enter my counting room as clerk, Richard?" he asked.
Dick was about to say "bully," when he recollected himself, and answered, "Very much."
"I suppose you know something of arithmetic, do you not?"
"Yes, sir."
"Then you may consider yourself engaged at a salary of $10 a week. You may come next Monday."
$10? repeated Dick, thinking he must have misunderstood.
"Yes. Will that be sufficient?"
"It's more than I can earn," said Dick, honestly.
"Perhaps it is at first," said Mr. Rockwell, smiling, "but I am willing to pay you that. I will besides advance you as fast as your progress will justify it."
Dick was so elated that he hardly restrained himself from some demonstration, which would have astonished the merchant. But he exercised self-control, and only said, "I'll try to serve you faithfully, sir, that you won't repent having taken me into your service."
"And I think you will succeed," said Mr. Rockwell, encouragingly. "I will not detain you any longer, for I have some important business to attend to. I shall expect to see you on Monday morning."
Dick left the counting room, hardly knowing whether he stood on his head or his heels, so overjoyed was he at the sudden change in his fortunes. $10 a week was to him a fortune, and 3 times as much as he had expected to obtain at first. Indeed, he would have been glad, only the day before, to get a place at $3 a week. He reflected that with the stock of clothes which he now had on hand, he could save up at least half of it, and even then live better than he had been accustomed to do, so that his little fund in the savings bank, instead of being diminished, would be steadily increasing. Then he was to be advanced if he deserved it. It was indeed a bright prospect for a boy who, only a year before, could neither read nor write, and depended for a night's lodging upon the chance hospitality of an alleyway or old wagon. Dick's great ambition to grow up spectable seemed likely to be accomplished after all. "I wish Fosdick was as well off as I am," he thought generously. But he determined to help his less fortunate friend, and assist him up the ladder as he advanced himself. When Dick entered his room on Mott Street, he discovered that some one else had been there before him, and 2 articles of wearing apparel had disappeared. "By gracious!" he exclaimed, "somebody's stole my Washington coat and Napoleon pants. Maybe it's an agent of Barnum's, who expect to make a fortune by exhibiting the valuable wardrobe of a gentleman of fashion." Dick did not shed many tears over his loss, as in his present circumstances he never expected to have any further use for the well-worn garments. It may be stated that he afterwards saw them adorning the figure of Micky Maguire, but whether that estimable young man stole them himself, he never ascertained. As to the loss, Dick was rather pleased that it had occurred. It seemed to cut him off from the old vagabond life, which he hoped never to resume. Henceforward he meant to press onward, and rise as high as possible. Although it was yet only noon, Dick did not go out again with his brush. He felt that it was time to retire from business. He would leave his share of the public patronage to other boys less fortunate than himself. That evening Dick and Fosdick had a long conversation. Fosdick rejoiced heartily in his friend's success, and on his side had the pleasant news to communicate that his pay had been advanced to $6 a week. "I think we can afford to leave Mott Street now," he continued. "This house isn't as neat as it might be, and I shall like to live in a nicer quarter of the city." "All right," said Dick. "We'll hunt up a new room tomorrow. I shall have plenty of time, having retired from business. I'll try to get my regular customers to take Johnny Nolan in my place. That boy hasn't any enterprise. He needs somebody to look out for him." "You might give him your box and brush, too, Dick." "No," said Dick. "I'll give him some new ones, but mine I want to keep, to remind me of the hard times I've had, when I was an ignorant bootblack, and never expected to be anything better." "When, in short, you were Ragged Dick. You must drop that name, and think of yourself now as Richard Hunter, Esquire," said our hero, smiling. "A young gentleman on the way to fame and fortune," added Fosdick. Here ends the story of Ragged Dick. As Fosdick said, he is Ragged Dick no longer. He has taken a step upward, and is determined to mount still higher. There are fresh adventures in store for him, and for others who have been introduced in these pages. Those who have felt interested in this early life will find his history continued in a new volume, forming the second of the series, and to be called Fame and Fortune, or The Progress of Richard Hunter. End of chapter 27. End of story.